Hey guys, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. This is the app we are going to build today. We will be using ReactJS, Redux Toolkit, and everything will be written in TypeScript. This expense tracker is inspired by TraversyMedia. Brad built that app with ReactJS using JavaScript and the context API, and we will be building this thing now completely in TypeScript using Redux Toolkit. And also for the styling and for some quick component scaffolding, we will be using React Bootstrap. I hope you will learn something. Let's have a good time together and see you in the tutorial. Alrighty, let's start with coding. First of all, I cd into projects. That's the folder where all my projects are living in. And then we can do npm init write at latest. And we give it a name of expense tracker. And since we want to use TypeScript, we have to specify some more things here. We have to add this part here. And then we can hit enter finally. And it's installed. Now we can cd into our directory. And we can do npm I. Now we can do code empty space dot. This will bring up Visual Studio Code. And the good thing is we are already in the right directory here. So what we can do is npm run dev. And we have already our app running. Nice. Now let's start to clean up a bit, because we have some stuff here that we don't need. Let's go into our source folder. We have app.css, we don't need it. In the app.tsx we have two imports here that we don't need. We do not need this hook here. At the moment we don't need this stuff here, but we can leave just this div here. Index.css we do not need. Logo.svg we do not need. And then also here this import in main.tsx. We do not need it either. All right. Now we have a nice empty ReactJS application. Let's start with our folder structure. We have a folder called components. In it, we will be having a few components. The first one being called balance.tsx. Another one called expense history.tsx. Then income and expense.tsx. And finally transaction form.tsx. These are our components that we will be using. Next, we will have a folder called hooks. In it, we will have a file called hooks.ts. We leave it empty for now. Next, let's create a folder in our source folder called Redux. And this folder will have a file called store.ts. Let's create a store object here by saying export const store is equal to configure store. And I need to import it manually like this. And of course, I forgot a really important thing. We need to install some dependencies. So let's do it now. We can add another window here down below by clicking on this cross. And let's install a few more dependencies. npm I Then we need ReduxJS /toolkit. Then we need React Redux, React Bootstrap. And that should be it. Hit enter. Good. Now I should get some auto-completion here. Parentheses, curly brackets. And now I have to specify a key here called reducer, which is empty for now. Next, we have to create two types. These are very important. We will be using them in the hooks.ts file, and why we will be using them you will see in a bit. So let's say export type root state is equal to return type of store.getState. And we need another type, export type is equal to app dispatch. It's equal to type of store.dispatch. Next, we have to connect our store here with our app. So let's do it. We go to main.tsx, and here we can use a provider component, which we can use to wrap our complete app here. And of course I have to import it, provider. There it is. And this provider expects props called store. And we have to pass in our store that we've created. That's it. Now our app is connected to our store. That's it. Now our app is connected to our Redux store. Let's go back to hooks.ts now. Here we can create two strongly typed hooks now. Export cons use app dispatch, and that is a function that returns something of app dispatch, and this is equal to use dispatch. We have to import app dispatch from our Redux store. And let's also create another hook, export const use app selector. And here this thing is of typed use selector hook. And this is a generic which takes in a type of a root state. And this is equal to use selector, which we have to import from React Redux. There we go. And you see we are using these two types here that we've created earlier. And by using them, we get very nice auto-completion whenever we use these two hooks here. And you will see it in action soon. So this is why we created these two. I would say this is best practice. It's from the Redux Toolkit page. So yeah, it works well. And yeah, let's keep going. Next, let's go to our Redux folder, create another folder called features. And in it, we will have a file called expense slice.tsx. Let's create an interface here. And this interface will describe our global state, right? Because we are using Redux, we we have a global state, which is accessible from every component. That's a good thing about Redux. We do not have to pass props from parent to children to grandchildren and so on, but we can get the state into every component, and how we can do it, you will see it in a bit. And also a good thing is we can also change this global state by dispatching action, and we can also do it from every component. We have a balance here, that is a number, an expense, which is a number, an income, which is a number, and we have an expense history, which is an object having a name called expense name, and it's of type string. And then also we have a property called amount, which is a number. Let's define our initial state. Let's define our initial state, which is of type expense state. And by doing so, Redux Toolkit knows now that our initial state has to have this structure here with all these properties and with all these types. So we have to say balance is 0, expense is 0, income is 0, expense history is just an empty array. And by the way, I forgot I have to put an array here. So expense history is an array of objects having an expense name and amount property. Now let's create our slice. Export const expense slice is equal to create slice. Then we have to give it a name of expense, for example, and we have to specify reducers, which is an object, and also we have to pass in the initial state. Under reducers, we can now write down some actions that are capable of changing this initial state here. And the beauty about Redux is that we can change this initial state from every component. And how it is done is by dispatching actions from the component. So this is why we have something called reducers here, where we can specify actions that can be dispatched from any component to change this initial state. And we will be having a few of these actions. So yeah, let's create them. And by the way, in Redux Toolkit, you always create slices of a state. Yeah, you always call it slice at the end. And each slice lives in a folder called features. Let's start with our first action. It's called add expense to history. And this will be an arrow function. And this arrow function will be given two arguments. One is a state and the other one is an action argument, which is of type payload action. And here I get an arrow. Let's import that thing here. And here I forgot a comma. Payload action is a generic type, so it takes in another type P here. And with the help of P, we can specify the type of the payload here. And this type is important. It helps us with autocompletion again. And what I mean by it, you will see it in a bit. So don't worry. For this case, let's create another interface called iExpense. And it has two properties: expense name, which is a string, And then also it has another property called amount, which is either a number or a string. And we can take this interface and put it in angle brackets next to payload action. And now we want to add an object which has this structure here to a list. And by the way, to this list here, the expense history. And in this case, it is important that the amount is only a number, because later we will do some calculations and we want the amount to be a number. So we have to do a check here. We have to check whether action.payload, and now you see we will get nice auto-completion here because we pass in this iExpense type here or interface. So here we have to check if action.payload.amount is not a number, and I have to do it like this with type of, and only if it's not a number, because then it will be a string for sure. I want to do the following. I want to say state.expense history, and I want to push something into this empty array, and I want to push in an object with the property of expense name, which is action.payload.expense name, and the second property is the amount, which is action.payload.amount. And here it's complaining now. It says type string is not assignable to type number. And this is because the amount here is a string for sure. Yeah, it's either a number or a string. And we said if it's not a number, yeah, then it must be a string. And for this case, we have to transform this thing into a number or into a float. Float is better here because we are working with money. So float is better. What we can do here is turn this thing into a float by saying parse float and then pass it in like this. Because parse float returns a number, and now the error is gone. Yeah, maybe let's keep going. Let's keep writing down all the other actions that we need. Let's also create a function called calculate balance. This is also an arrow function, and it receives 2 arguments. But here we do not pass in any arguments. So this is of type void. Since expense history is an array of these objects here, and we want to calculate a value, a single value, so we want to transform an array of objects into a single value, we have to use the higher order function reduce. And how this can be done, you will see it now. So let's jump into the coding here. We say state.balance, yeah, because we have a balance property here in our state, which is initially 0. We can say state.balance is equal to state.expense history reduce, and reduce takes in a function here, which is given 2 arguments, accumulator and the expense. If you are unsure about how reduce works, I made a video about it. I will link it in the video description. And here we just say we want to return the result of accumulator plus x.amount. And now we get an error because TypeScript thinks that this type is not of type number, because here we have a type of number, but here it's an object. And then also state.balance is a number, so this is not working. In order for TypeScript to correctly infer this type here, we have to pass in an initial value, which is 0. And now TypeScript automatically knows that the accumulator is not an object, but something of type number. We can also see it if we hit Control and left mouse button. We see that the reduce function takes in a previous value and a current value, and then also an initial value, and it is of the same type as the previous value. So if the initial value is 0, TypeScript knows 0 is a number, so it infers that this thing here, the previous value, must be a number as well. And what we do with reduce here, we loop over an array of objects, and we reduce this array of objects to a single value called balance. Okay, next let's create another function called calculate income. I just copy the arguments here. And also the type for the payload action is here void, because we do not need any arguments. And here we will be using reduce as well. We say state.expense is equal to state.expenseHistory dot reduce. Again, we are getting the accumulator and X here. Why this is called accumulator, you can see also in my video that I linked down below. I don't want to explain now again, because otherwise the video gets too long. And in this application, we define expense as something negative. If it has a value lower than 0, we know it's an expense. If the value is above 0, we know it's income. This is how we define it here in our expense tracker. So what we can do here is we can do if check. We can say if x.amount is lower than 0, then we want to do the following. We always want to return an absolute value. So we do not want to have a minus value or something like this. So we say math.apps. And here we then do accumulator plus x.amount. And here we are still getting an error, because here we are returning a number, but only if this condition is met. So if this condition is not met, we still have to return something. So here we just say return 0. So for the case that we do not have any objects in this expense history that have an amount lower than 0, we want to return 0, yeah? Okay, let's create our third function here. Calculate income. And I just copy this here. In our application, we want to define income as a value, as an amount higher than 0. Yeah, everything that is above 0 is income, and everything that is below 0 is an expense. And here we can say state.income is equal to state.expenseHistory.reduce again. We pass in the accumulator and X. And since we want to calculate the income, we need to do a check here. We need to say x.amount must be greater than 0. And only then we want to return math.apps, yeah, just because we want to return an absolute value for the income as well as for the expense. For the expense, we do not want to return a negative value, so we just use math.apps, but you do not have to do it like this. But it's just how I decided to do it. So stay with me. Here we can say accumulator plus x.expense. Oops, sorry, x.amount. And here it's still complaining because we need to pass in 0 here. So TypeScript knows that the accumulator is of type number. And now we are still getting an error here. And this is because we are only returning a number for the case when this condition here is met, right? But what happens if this condition is not met? We do not return anything. And for this case, we need to return something. So we just return the accumulator. And the reason here is only if the amount is higher than 0, then we know, okay, there is some income, and then we can do this calculation here. But if we do not have a value that is higher than 0, there's nothing to calculate, right? So we just return this value here. And due to this check here, we will only perform this calculation, yeah, for values that are higher than 0. So we calculate the income. But don't worry, it will make sense soon. Yeah, it's a bit hard to understand maybe now. It's not so difficult really. Let's create another function, and I just copy this one because it is very similar. We could also put it in one function, but I just prefer to make two smaller functions. And we name this one here calculate expense. And here we want to say if the amount is lower than 0, then we want to perform this calculation. And for the case that we do not have any expenses, we want just to return 0. And by the way, here I could also just return 0, or maybe we can return ACC in both cases. Doesn't matter. And we are already done with our reducer logic. Yeah, that was it. Now let's work on our components. Let's start with our balance component. This balance component needs access to our global state. Yeah, this is the beauty of Redux. Every component can access the global state and get data, or it can dispatch actions to change the global state. Here we just want to get the balance, and we can use our strongly typed hook that we created. It's called useAppSelector here, and this thing takes in a function as argument. And you will see the beauty of this thing now in action. We get very nice auto-completion. And of course, I forgot something. Let's go back to our store.ts. Here, we still have nothing, right? So in order to get the nice auto-completion, we need to import it. But first, let's go back to our expense slice. And here we need to export some stuff. Here, we need to export all our functions. And then also we want to export default expense slice.reducer. Now we can go back to our store and we can say import expense reducer from features expense slice. And then we can say, maybe we call it expense, and then we pass in our expense reducer. And now we specified a key here called expense. The name is not important. You can call it whatever you like. And now here in our balance component, we can pass in the state here into our error function that this hook takes. And then we can say state.expense, and then we can access the balance. And you see we get very nice auto-completion here, right? This is the beauty of TypeScript. This is because we created this thing here, this strongly typed selector hook here in hooks.ts. And this thing here takes in a type of root state, which is this thing here. And root state contains everything that we have in our slice here, right? All these properties here. So now this hook is very smart and very wise, you could say. It knows about all the stuff we have in here. And this is why we get nice auto-completion. And here we just can say your balance. Then we can do a span and say dollar curly brackets balance. Nice. Now we do not see anything, so let's go back to our app.tsx. But before we do this, we need to get our CSS from Bootstrap. So you can come to this site here, React Bootstrap, copy this link here, and paste it in index.html, maybe somewhere here. Now let's go back to our app, and we can make use of some React Bootstrap components. Let's use a container. And of course, I need to install something else. I forgot to install the types for React Bootstrap. So let's do it. npm I and then add types / React Bootstrap. Now I can use React components here. Let's use the container component in our app here. And let's import our balance component. And there we see our balance already, right? It's 0 at the moment. That's not too good, but also not too bad. Better than having only expenses. And let's also import our other components, income and expense. Expense history. And transaction form. Let's make it that all this is centered. So in our container, we can provide some class names. Let's say deflex, flex column, align items center. Yep. Then we say margin top of 5, like this. Let's make it a card, like this, and give it a shadow and rounded corners, like this. Nice. And also let's give it a style, an inline style, and set the width or the max width to 500 pixel. Maybe let's give it also a bit of a padding. Let's say P3, yeah, like this. And also here in our balance component, let's give it some styling. Let's give a class name of fvboard to our div here, like this. And let's give it, and let's give our span element here also a class name of text muted. Yeah, like this. That's it. Now let's start with our expense history component. This component should get access to all the expenses. And this component should get access to our expense history, you could say. You remember the objects having an expense name and then also an amount, yeah? And we want to display them, whether they are negative or positive, doesn't matter. We want to display the expenses, but also the incomes. So yeah, let's do it. First of all, let's get the expenses. Yeah, maybe the naming is a bit unlucky. It's not the best, but you will see how this will work out. And then we say use app selector again, because we want to access the global state from our store. Here we get our state again. Arrow function, we want to return state.expense and then the history, expense history. Let's set the width of our div here to 100%. And within this div, we can loop over all the expenses now. Expenses.map. We get each expense here, and then also I, which is the index. And here we can create a div for each expense. We give it a key of I. And within this div, we have two other divs where we will be displaying the name, x curly brackets, x dot expense name, and then also the amount, x dot amount. At the moment, we do not have any expenses, so we do not see anything, but that's okay. And I would say that's good for now. Next, let's work on our transaction form so that we actually can create some transactions or expenses or what you want to call them. And then we can display them here, right? This is maybe the best. So let's work on the transaction form now. And this transaction form will change the global state. So it will dispatch actions. In order to do so, we need const dispatch is equal to, and here we can use our strongly typed hook called use app dispatch. You remember from hooks.ts. Here it is. And then also we want to have some local state. So we have a bit of local state here that lives in our transaction form, just the state of the inputs that we have here. So we say const expense, comma set expense, and this tuple will be returned from use state, which we have to import from React, and this will be of type iExpense. Now, whenever our inputs that we will be creating in a bit change, when the onChange event is triggered on them, we want to call a function called onChange, which is equal to an arrow function here. And that's okay for now. It will contain some logic, but we will implement it later. Next, let's go and output some stuff in our transaction form. Let's go to React Bootstrap, and under form controls, you can find something like this here. Just copy this thing here, or we don't need this outer form tag here, just the inside. And we can paste it in here. And of course, we have to import form. Oops, that was the wrong import. We have to import it from React Bootstrap. And let's wrap it in a fragment here. Let's delete the second here, the second one. And we can copy this one here. And here we can call it maybe just text. And as placeholder, enter text. And then here we can say amount. And as placeholder, enter amount. Maybe I put it in a div as well, so we can style it a bit. Let's give it a margin top of 3. So we have a bit of space here. And then also let's have a h3 down below with a styling class name. Let's say border bottom, border 2. Yeah, that we have a little border here. And then we say add new transaction. Maybe like this. Next, we want to be able, whenever the onChange event here on these inputs is triggered, yeah, which is the case every time we type something here, we want to update the state here called expense. So how can we do this? We have to say onChange here. So whenever the onChange event is triggered, we want to run a function that executes onChange. And this function gets automatically the event object E. And whenever the onChange event of these two inputs is triggered, we want to update this expense object. How can we do it? This is now a bit complicated. We can make this onChange function a generic function. So we provide these angle brackets here. And then we can say k extends key of I expense. And this enables us to say here in the parentheses, we can now say we take in a key which is of type k, and then also we take in a value which is of type I expense at k. So what did we do here? We made onChange a generic function that takes in a type of k, and this type of k extends key of I expense. This means k is either expense name or amount. Yeah, one of these two keys. And by doing so, we are able now in the arguments to say that the key should be of type k. So key can either be expense name or amount. And then we can say that the value is type of I expense at, for example, expense name or amount. So by doing this syntax, we access basically the values for these two keys. That's basically what we do here. And now we can say, here we can update our state, set expense. We can say spread operator expense, comma, and then key. And by putting it in square brackets, we make a dynamic assignment, and then we say colon value. So whatever the key here is, either expense name or amount, we assign the value. And here it is important we use the spread operator because we only want to change whatever the key here is. If we had more properties, not only 2 but 10 or something like this, we would spread all of the properties in here that we do not want to change. And all the properties that we want to change, we can put in here after a comma. Now let's run this onChange function whenever the onChange event is triggered on our inputs. So we can say onChange, and then we say we run a function that returns onChange. And here now we can pass in e.targetName and e.target.value. And of course here in the and of course here I have to provide e, which is an event object. Now I get a problem here. I pass in e.target.name as key, and it says that argument of type string is not assignable to parameter of type key of expense. So TypeScript does not know that this thing here is a key of either expense name or amount. It does not know it. So what we can do here, we can say e.target.name as key of iExpense. By doing so, we are telling TypeScript here, this thing can only be a key of iExpense, so either expense name or amount. And here I get an error now, so what we can do here is say the initial state should be expense name. It should be an empty string, and then also the amount should be an empty string, like this. Yep. Now the error is gone here. And what we are doing here again, we are doing a dynamic assignment. So we spread in all the values that we do not want to change. And then we do a dynamic assignment. So we say the key. And the key, by the way, is whatever e.target name is. And e.target name is, in this case, amount here, in the second case. And in the first case, it is expense name. So it matches these two here, right? And the value is whatever we typed in here. All right, next we need a button. And we can give it a text of add transaction. We have to import the button from React Bootstrap. And whenever the onClick event on the button is triggered, we want to do the following. We want to run a function. And this function now should dispatch actions. And why? Because we want to change the global state. You remember in our slice here, we have a property called expense history. And now we want to, for example, add an expense to a history. So we want to push something in this array. And we can do this by dispatching an action, which is one of these here, right? And now we have to perform, now here in the function body, we have to perform an annoying check, which took me a bit of time to figure out. So here we have to say, if type of expense.amount is a string, and then we also have to check for is not a number, pass in parse float, and then the expense.amount. And on top of that, we have to put a bang operator in front of it. Parse float. And of course this is wrong here. Yep. Like this. So why are we performing this check? First of all, the amount can either be a string or a number, but we check here if it's a string. And we do it because here in the second check, the amount must be a string. So if it's a number, we cannot pass it in here, right? So we need to check, is it a string? And if it's true, then we want to do this here. And here we pass in a string, turn it into a float, and then we check if it's not a number, but we put a bang operator in front of it. So we check if it's a number. So if the result of this is a number, only then we want to keep going, right? Only then we want to dispatch actions. Because it does not make sense to dispatch an action if we type in a text, which is okay. But then as the amount, we type in something like this, right? And then we click add transaction. This does not make any sense, yeah? We only want to process the transaction when this thing here is a number, right? So this is what this check is all about, yeah? First we check if the amount is a string, and then we check if the amount is actually a number, yeah? After it has been converted from a string to a float. if the result of this is actually a number. And we use here is not a number, but then we put a bang operator in front of it, so it's the opposite. We test for the opposite if it's a number, you could say, right? And we do it here because we only want to have numbers in this input. Because here you see in our slice, balance, expense, income, they are all numbers. We do not want to have any strings here. But first, when we get the value here, the amount from our input, it's always a string. That's the problem, right? We do not get it as a number. So we get it as a string and we need to convert it into a number. That's the thing, right? So yeah, let's keep progressing. What we do next is we can dispatch an action. And we dispatch add expense to history. And you see I get nice auto completion. And it is because we have this strongly typed hook here, right? So if we pass this if check here, then we want to dispatch an action. And we want to dispatch add expense to history. And we pass in the expense. Now let's see if it's working. We can type in something and here we can enter the amount. And we see it here. Yay, it's working. But if we type in something like this, a few letters, it does not work, right? Next, you see the styling is a bit off. Let's work on this now. Let's go to the expense history again. And we need to put in some work here. Let's go to the outer div and provide some class names. And here we can do the following. We can say if expense dot amount is lower than 0, then we want to provide these CSS classes or Bootstrap classes. Otherwise, we want to provide these ones here. Like this. And you see, yay, we have 2 green ones. Let's see what happens if I put a negative value in here. And we get a negative, right? That does not look too bad, right? But if I refresh now, you see there's no text, and I want to have a text here that says no transactions yet or something like this. So what I can say here, down below this thing here, I can say expenses dot length. So if we have no transactions here, right? If it's 0, the length of this array here, then we want to show a div with class name p1 my3, and we say no transactions yet. There we go. Next, let's go back to our transaction form and let's dispatch a few other actions here. So we want also to calculate the income and the expense and also the balance, right? So let's dispatch these actions here. I just paste them in here. And important, they do not take any arguments because they get all the information from the slice here. If you look into the code again, you see that they get the information from the expense history. And I can show it to you how this works in the state. You can go to Redux here. If you have Redux DevTools installed, I think it's called, or React DevTools, then you have these 2 tabs here in your browser, in your Chrome browser. And now you see our state looks like this, our global state. Everything is empty and expense history is an empty array. But if I type something in here, hit enter, you see that all these actions are dispatched. And now I see that I have a balance of this and expense history where this entry is in. Now I can provide something else. I just bought a book, for example, and it costs $20. So I provide a negative value here, hit enter. What I see now here is that I have in the expense history, I have two objects. Yeah, one is an income and one is an expense. And maybe this name expense history is a bit unlucky, right? But yeah, you can figure out another name because it is not only expenses but also income, right? So this name is not really good. But I was not creative enough to figure out a better name. But what you can see is everything is calculated well. You see the balance is calculated correctly here. And next, let's work on our last component, income and expense. Because this component here does nothing at the moment. It's a bit lazy. Let's change it. This component will have access to the income and the expense from the global state. So if I show it again to you, the global state here under Redux, it will access these two properties and just display them. It will not dispatch any actions, so it will not change the states there. So we say const income is equal to use app selector which gets access to the state and returns state.expense.income. And then I just copy this thing here. We get also the expense. And what I can do now here is use a stack. And then I can have a div here. And in the div, I have another div which has a div in it. And then also a span. In that div here, I say income. And then in the span, I say $sign and expense. And then just copy the inner div here, paste it down below, and we say also income, and then here income, like this. And let's also provide some classes here. The outer div here, let's give it some class names. I just paste them in, so we save some time. So we make it a card with a nice shadow and set the width to 100%. So it has the same width as its parent element, like this, nice. And then we give the stack a direction of horizontal. So, and of course here this div is wrong. This is too much, let's delete it. Sorry for that. Yeah, this should be better. Now they are next to each other. Let's give these two divs here, right? This one and this one, the following class names, like this and like this. Yep. Also, let's provide a class name of text danger to this span here down below, and then also to the upper one here. But here we change it to text dash success. Yep, like this. And maybe also let's make it bold. The income. And this is wrong. Let's take the income and put it in the div. Like this. And also down below we do the same, and make it also bold. Yep, nice. Now let's test it. I made an income of 100. Alright, balance is 100, which is correct. And here this is wrong because it's not updating. Let's try a negative value. Okay, this is correct. And the balance is only 80, which is also correct. But yeah, the income here disappeared, which is not correct. And also these are named income and income, which is also not correct. So let's go back to income and expense. And of course, the second one here is the expense. Or maybe no. It's the opposite, expense and income. Let's do it like this. And then I have to swap the classes as well. Let's do it well like this, right? And here we get an error with this thing here with the expense. So let's go back to our slice. And you see here where we calculate the expense. I assign the result of this to state.income. And here I do the same, state.income. And this is wrong. So let's fix it. This must be state.expense. And now let's try again. I just got paid for my job in web development. I got $100. Income is 100 and my balance is 100, which is correct. Zero expensive at the moment. Let's buy a book, which costs $20. So minus 20. And we see expense is 20, which is correct. And my balance is only 80 now. And my income is 100. So this is working fine. And maybe you see here we have absolute values here. And again, this is because in our slice, I used math.apps, right? But you could also display them as non-absolute values. This is up to you. This is not really important. But the balance can also be negative. Let's say I bought a car for minus 10,000. Then you see the balance can also go minus, while these two are absolute values. Yeah, that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. We use Redux Toolkit to have a global state so that all these components can access the state. And also this component here, the transaction form, was able to dispatch actions to mutate the state actually, right? So this is pretty cool. I hope it was helpful for you in some way or form. Anyway, enough talking. See you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good time.